Take a look at this picture. Take a closer look. Does it look like baptism? They're all dressed in white, look like saints. But when you realized this is not baptism, but rather a voodoo ceremony, it looks like they are being baptized into Jesus Christ, but they are not. It just resembles it. It resembles the ritual, the act, the ceremony, but the source paints a different picture. Black Christianity has never left her voodoo past or her voodoo mind. If you take a closer look at this picture, this is supposed to be the Virgin Mary. Notice the dagger in his hand. Black psychology and black culture has watered down the gospel in order to fit a voodoo past, or in order to make links with the voodoo consciousness, and the evidence I will show as this video develops. Many black quote-unquote Christians will not admit that if a voodooist enter into the black church, the spirit inside these black people wouldn't even stir. And you have to ask yourself the question, why is it that black people are comfortable with voodoo practices, rituals, to such degree that in this picture you can see a voodoo saint and Christian hand in hand? Many black churches don't want to admit, but if Satan walked in, they wouldn't even be able to discern the difference between Christ and the devil. And the reason being is that if you enter most black churches, they are gospelless and they do not even know what the gospel means. They recite it by memory, but when it comes to practices, they resort back to their voodoo ancestral worship, and I'll prove that in a second. Hence, the cross, which is supposed to be redemptive and atonement, in the psyche of the black churchgoers, it symbolizes something else. They resort back to their voodoo practices. Although they take on a form of godliness, many black churchgoers are actually indulging in voodoo worship and voodoo practices. And these also include Seventh-day Adventist, most black church organizations. So in this picture here you see a woman in a trance, but obviously she's invoking the goddess, the voodoo goddess. It's the same trance that you see inside black churches, where unbridled spirits and feral tongues are rampant with no discernment, but of course the behavior and the conduct and the consciousness is very much central on voodoo ritualism. When the old slaves took on Christianity, what they did, they called Patrick Dambala, they even changed the name of Christ to something else. Virgin Mary became Azuli. But even though these words are not used inside these black churches, their consciousness and the language and the symbols through their behavior, the style of worship, and of course, if you observe or analyze most black churches, you will notice that their emphasis is never on the gospel, but black culture, practical rituals and legalism and works, never Christ-centered. They really do not understand the meaning of grace, saved by grace, salvation and atonement, and the reason being they've never left their voodoo past. Hence, if you go to all these different black churches, what they want you to do, they want you to re-baptize, go back into the water ritual, which is has strong emphasis in the voodoo traditions. Every black church wants to re-baptize you, even though the Bible teaches there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism. But in the minds of these voodoo practitioners, they revamp the Bible, and if you was to join the Seventh Adventist, they want to re-baptize you or revitalize your mind to join their voodoo consciousness. If you join the New Testament, this same principle apply. They want to re-baptize you or renew your mind to their organization. It has nothing to do with Christ, but a subconscious voodoo practice. Because what they are doing, they are putting their voodoo mark upon you, their voodoo ritual. It's symbolical, and they know what they're doing. When you're going into that water, that voodoo ritual, you're not being baptized into Christ, but rather they're putting their voodoo ritual onto you. And why do you think there's no miracles inside these black churches? Why do you think the gospel is never being taught inside these black churches? If you ever read the book I Left Christianity and Found Christ, you will see the powerful, overwhelming evidence where occult rituals, witchcrafts has gone on into these black churches and they didn't even know. And do you know why? Because they're from the same source. From the time you can baptize someone 15 times, and I use the word baptism in quote, you know something is wrong with your club, with your organization. You're putting your voodoo mark on that person. You're not giving them Jesus Christ. You're not liberating them. You're doing something else to them. You're putting your spells on them.